The Japanese enjoyed the benefits of combat experience from the full-scale war which had been raging in China since 1937. They rode an initial tide of enormous success as combined forces struck against the Americans in the Hawaiian and the Philippine Islands, against the British Imperial forces in Burma and Malaya, and against the Dutch in the East Indies. Ultimately, however, Japan couldn't match the manpower strength and industrial muscle of her implacable enemies, and was slowly driven to total defeat. The Lily went into production in 1939, and nearly 2,000 were built between then and late 1944. It was an inadequate aircraft with only 3 machine guns for protection against enemy fighters. Early versions powered by 950 horsepower Nakajima radial engines could only carry 660 pounds of bombs. But the introduction of the 1150 horsepower radials in 1942 increased this to 1,764 pounds. The Lily had a high top speed of 298 to 314 miles an hour, depending on power plant, but still needed all the fighter escort it could get. Much more successful was the Imperial Japanese Navy's Mitsubishi G3M, which the Allies codenamed Nell. This was one of the 2 most important Japanese bombers of the war and played a key role in the attacks on Pearl Harbor, Hong Kong, Rangoon and Singapore. Given the vast distances of the Pacific Ocean, though, range was more important than speed, and the aircraft was designed first and foremost with this in mind. Compared with German aircraft of similar size and configuration, a maximum range of almost 3,900 miles in the final M3 production version was a considerable achievement. This performance made it a strategic bomber in all but name, although the payload was low at 1,764 pounds of bombs or a single 18-inch torpedo. Even the provision of a 20mm cannon in the dorsal turret, in addition to up to 4 machine guns, was not enough to keep enemy fighters at bay. The Mitsubishi G3M made its operational debut in July 1937, taking off from bases on the island of Formosa, now called Taiwan, for deep penetration missions into mainland China. Just over 4 years later, it was attacking Allied installations all over the Far East and Pacific region. The feat for which the G3M Nell is best remembered, however, is its part in the sinking of the British battleship Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser Repulse on the 10th of December 1941. This wartime reconstruction shows how aircraft operating from Indochina found and attacked the 2 capital ships after their position had been reported by a Japanese submarine. About 90 level bombers, dive bombers and torpedo bombers were involved in attacks lasting some 2 hours. The effect on British morale was similar to that on the American nation 3 days earlier, and showed, above all, the vulnerability of capital ships unsupported by aircraft carriers. Mitsubishi G4Ms, codenamed Betty, also took part in the attacks on the Prince of Wales and Repulse. This aircraft, which had a single vertical tail surface instead of the G3M's 2, was developed by the same design team as a naval attack bomber. In all, 2,446 were built, making it numerically the most important of all Japanese bomber types. Range was again a principal requirement, so the wings were packed with 1,078 gallons of fuel, and everything possible was done to lighten the structure. This flimsy construction, coupled with the lack of armour or self-sealing fuel tanks, made the Betty extremely prone to catching fire or breaking up in the air when attacked by Allied fighters. And its unfortunate crews nicknamed it the one-shot lighter. The prototype first flew in 1939, and the aircraft saw its operational debut over China. 120 G4Ms took part in the assault on Pearl Harbor, and the aircraft also conducted several raids against the northern Australian port of Darwin, which was an important staging post for Allied troops and supplies. Powered by a pair of 1,530 horsepower Kasai 11 or 15 radial engines, the G4M1 Betty had a range of 2,300 miles, carrying a 1,764-pound bomb load. It carried a crew of 7 and had a defensive armament of 4 machine guns, plus a 20mm cannon in the tail. After the Solomon Islands campaign in August 1942, the aircraft was re-engined with 1,800 horsepower radials. Fuel capacity was increased still further, and the bomb load raised to 2,205 pounds. This rare sequence from the camera guns of American fighters highlights the Betty's propensity to catch fire or break up in the air after being hit by a stream of heavy caliber machine gun fire.